Welcome to the Pindown, your Detroit Pistons podcast. I'm your host, Wes Davenport from Motor City Hoops and Detroit Bad Boys.
And I'm Blake Silverman, writer for Detroit Bad Boys, covering everything Pistons, and news writer for Sports Illustrated.
Blake, it finally happened. I was trying to get back over to the same exact phrasing that we use every single time for the opening of this podcast, and the Google Doc that we've got up for our outline this week, I had it scrolled down to the bottom. I looked over and I got it wrong. I actually screwed up the two sentences that I should have memorized.
Hey, it's all good. It happens, especially when there's so much going on actually in the basketball world. It's easy to just get past what we're used to, because this is all new to us right now.
Yeah, right. Maybe I can blame the Pistons' success for my mistakes and just apparent inability to memorize literally two sentences. That's what I screwed up to start the show today. But like you said, we've got some great stuff to talk about today. We've both been looking forward to this. At Mipsy313 in the chat here, welcome, man. He's saying Pistons in 5. They've got a shot, right? Series is tied 1-1, coming back to Detroit. How about that?
Crazy. I mean, it's funny because I think if you would have told us when we were recording last week before the series started that this series would be coming back to Detroit 1-1, you'd take it all day. And after, I'm kind of like, the Pistons should be up 2-0 right now. And that was a totally plausible outcome. It's also a plausible outcome that they could have been down 2-0. So you take what you can. But I think just the way this series has went, it's nice that it's kind of proved already, even though we're only through 2 games, that the Pistons belong here and they really have a shot to win this thing.
I mean, it hasn't really shown up as much in the quarters as I thought it would have. Like, after that second game, I was just off instinct guessing maybe they had won 5 or 6 quarters of basketball of the 8 that they have played so far, right out of these 2 games. And it's much more even. There's been 1 tie. Pistons have won 3. Knicks have won 4. But outside of that one fourth quarter, where obviously the Knicks went nuts and the Pistons kind of collapsed in on themselves in that first game, when the Knicks have won a quarter, it's been very, very tight. When the Pistons have won a quarter, it's been more by 5 or 6 points, which is really good to see. So, look, I think you could actually make an argument right now that the Pistons have been the better team through these 2 games, even though they're sitting tied at 1-1. And I don't think either of us would have guessed that coming into this.
No, and I think even if you don't look at the scores for each quarter, I think you can argue that the Pistons have been the better team for 7 of 8 quarters throughout this series so far, which, I mean, I think the Pistons aren't a good matchup for the Knicks, so I'm not totally shocked it's played out this way so far, but also just all these potential concerns that we've talked about that the Knicks are having, it wasn't really just discussion. And Cade Cunningham, the Knicks were able to keep him under control a bit in game 1, but he didn't really let that he didn't sulk in that or anything. He comes right out in game 2, has a great game, helps the Pistons win their first playoff game in, over 17 years. And in Madison Square Garden, nonetheless, that's not an easy place to win any game, especially a playoff game. So I think you just have to be thrilled where you stand right now. And game 3, I don't think it's a must-win for Detroit, but honestly, I think if the Pistons do win game 3, that might just be a backbreaker for the Knicks.
Apparently we got a little bit of audio issues, so apologize for that. I think the echo on my end is just the room that I'm in, so I'll work in the background, see if I could fix that. Blake will do the same. Of course, if you guys tuned into the Pistons Pulse last night when we recorded, same issues, very similar. So I don't know what's in the water here for Detroit podcast, but I guess we've got echo and audio volume type problems. We'll see what we could do. But regardless, I think we got to stick on Cade Cunningham, right? Because is it fair to say he's the scariest guy in this series, right? I think that we've already made the argument that he's probably the best player on the court. That has shown up so far out of these 2 games. Even in that first game where the Knicks kind of had him spinning a little bit, it was just really for the first half. The second half of basketball, he played extremely well. He did incredible with the floor game, with his, what did he end up with, like 12 assists. Yeah, he's had quite a bit of turnovers, but that'll happen when you're sending so many guys at him. I think that the Pistons were also oddly like a little surprised to see them double Cade so forcefully, because the Knicks hadn't done that in the regular season, but it was a little bit foreseeable. I felt like you should have guessed that this was the coverage they were going to employ against Cade. But the point is, you've got one half of basketball where, look, it's his first playoff game. It's a different style, right? They threw a couple of curveballs at him. He wasn't ready for it. But he comes out in the second half, and he looks great. He starts to get comfortable. And then in that second game, oh no, right? He just takes the roof off the place and lifts the Pistons all the way up to that first playoff win. And since 2008, I think was the stat. I think it was since 2008 against the Boston Celtics. With 33 very efficient points, there was nothing anybody could do, right? Even OG Anunoby, who was scoring on him, he bodied OG Anunoby a few times in that game on drives to the rim, where it's just, I don't know what you want to call it, like weight room strength. He's just bigger. I don't know what it is, but he played physical. He matched the intensity, and I think he stepped up to the moment there in that game too. And that was just incredible to watch. Not only was he the best player on the floor, but the way the Knicks were guarding him, it was just pure fear anytime he started getting downhill, and it's just fun to watch as a Pistons fan.
Yeah, and I just turned the volume up on my mic, so hopefully it's a little better. Apologies for any difficulties there, but I agree. I think Cade is definitely the scariest player on the court throughout this series. I think the only one that you can argue is like, yeah, your gut jumps out and says it's Jalen Brunson for the Knicks, but honestly, I think it's Karl Anthony Towns, just because, especially for the Pistons, we know that's a bit of a not the best matchup, and they were able to shut him down in the second half of game 2, and he didn't even score in the fourth quarter, I think. So if Cat is really rolling, I think that's the scariest player for the Pistons, and with Brunson and just how frustrating he is and all the fouls and stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. But it's Cade. Cade's the guy who you can't, even if you're limiting him as a scorer, like the Knicks did in game 1, like you mentioned, he had those 12 assists, and he's always a threat to go off for 30 points and more than that in any given night, which Jalen Brunson can do the same thing, but I think there's less of a way to shut down Cade Cunningham. You can certainly shut down different aspects of his game, but I still think he's going to be able to create offense. Whereas I think if Brunson isn't scoring, he's not getting to the line and stuff, it's just pure frustration almost, and you can limit it a little bit more. And with Cade, to a degree, I just think it's unstoppable.
Well, it is unstoppable, right? I mean, just look at what the Knicks have. Okay, Jalen Brunson, incredible player, but Jalen Brunson was extremely excited when Asar Thompson fouled out. Why? Because Asar Thompson was making his life a just living hell when he was out there. I know Asar fouled him, and we can get into the foul baiting stuff too if we really want to later on. Fine, that's part of the discussion, I guess, but Brunson was excited to get Asar Thompson out of the game, because you know what? Asar Thompson is a pretty good player to put against a smaller physical guard like Jalen Brunson. He can match him on speed. He can match him on quickness. He can match him on strength. And then he's got the length to play off and cover a lot of ground, not to mention the incredible vertical athlete that he is. So if Brunson tries to do the bump and fade away, Asar Thompson can still contest it. So the Pistons have an answer. They have an answer for Jalen Brunson. You look at Karl Anthony Towns, right? Pistons have two answers for Karl Anthony Towns. It's not just the Pistons. A lot of teams have been guarding Cat with smaller wings and forwards for the majority of this season. We had Andrew Claudio on the Pistons Pulse the other night. He was mentioning the exact same thing. I think Fred Katz brought it up in a recent article that he had just put out for The Athletic, if I remember correctly. But this is something that teams have been doing against the Knicks for a while now. It's working very well with Tobias Harris, but the Pistons even have another quiver in their cap because they've got Isaiah Stewart, who we know is great against Karl Anthony Towns, right? He can match him physically. He's quick enough to stop the drive. He's long enough to prevent the jump shot. Like, Isaiah Stewart's as good of a cat defender as Tobias Harris or any other smaller guard, or not guard, but forward has been this season for against the Knicks, I should say. The Knicks don't have that with Cade. They just don't. Even OG Anunoby, he's done it. I was so impressed with OG Anunoby in game one. He was almost as good in game two, but Cade just kind of figured it out, right? He figured out how to get a little bit of space and how to manipulate manipulate him a little bit off ball before getting the catch on the wing to put himself in a better position. All right, so once you get away from OG Anunoby, we know McCall Bridges cannot guard Cade Cunningham. We know Josh Hart cannot guard Cade Cunningham. If you get Cat on a switch, advantage Pistons. Gosh, if you get Jalen Brunson, you better be double teaming immediately. Like, the best the Knicks can do is slow him down one-on-one with OG or double. That's it. That's it.
Yeah, and I think I was listening to a podcast where Vinny Goodwill was talking, and he was talking about Kawhi Leonard, about how like a player like Luka Doncic, he hunts the switch, but Kawhi will go at whoever's in front of him. Obviously, want to get a better matchup, but I think Cade, I'm not making a player comparison, but I think Cade has a little bit of that too. Just no matter who's in front of him, maybe he won't drive if he doesn't have his ideal matchup or something like that. But no matter who's guarding him, I feel like he has a plan. He's still able to keep offenses moving and just make the right play in general, which we know he can do that. We've been watching his entire career. Just going into this playoffs, we haven't seen him play in this setting before. And I think we all were hoping and thought that he was capable of doing it, but it's so nice to just see that carry over, especially when you start a series as the 6th seed. You're going into Madison Square Garden, which is debatably the most hostile environment that you can go into, and just crazy atmosphere. To find a way to pull out a game here, the game 1 loss was bad, but to reset, not really let that get in your head a little bit, and then come out and take care of business in game 2. I think we've talked about a bunch of moments through this season for Cade. It was first his all-star moment, something that cemented him as an all-star, and then he hits that buzzer beater against the Heat on national TV, and that's kind of this is one of the best players in the NBA. And now I think that game 2, and even if you just look at his performance over the series, and I'm sure we'll see it continue, he's really just cementing himself as a star in this league, which I think those of us that are watching every game of this team, we're not surprised at it, but it's nice to see it carry over into this national setting, the postseason, where there's a lot of more eyeballs, and he's just doing what we know that he's capable of.
Let's have this podcast be the first one to bring back one of the main talking points about Cade Cunningham when he was drafted, right? Cade's a winner. We're seeing it right now. Cade's a winner. And what that does when your leader, your best player, is just a winning type of player for your team's confidence, for the way that they play off him. We're witnessing right now in these first 2 games why that's so dang valuable. What does Cade do in game 1, right? He scores. Yes, it's a little bit more inefficient. It wasn't incredibly inefficient, but it was a little bit more inefficient. he was mostly playing the floor game. He was getting other guys involved. He has 12 assists, which was fifth most for a playoff debut or something like that. There was some stat that they flashed up on the broadcast during that game too. But regardless, so in game one, why is he assisting so much? Because the Knicks are sending so much help his way. Like you said, he's just making the right basketball play. He's keeping his guys involved. And sure enough, that was an incredible shooting night until that fourth quarter when everybody else went cold. But Cade was finding open guys. They were hitting their shots. There you go. That's winning basketball. What happens in game two? Well, they kind of pull off on their switches, and Cade gets a little bit more aggressive right away early in the set. So instead of probing as much, he's being a lot more decisive. That's an adjustment he made out of game one. So right away, that's a feather in Cade's cap. But he knows he needs to be a scorer for this team to really take that next step, especially with the injury situation that they have, right? And so then what does he do in game two? He's a rebounder. He has 11 defensive rebounds. He had 12 in the game. I think he and Tobias Harris both had 12 rebounds against the Knicks because Isaiah Stewart's out, and they know that that's what this team needs right now in this game. When your best player can do that, right? In game one, I need to score, but I need to get my guys involved. In game two, I need to score even more, and then I need to pick up the slack on the rebounding because we're missing one of our centers. That's your best player that you're asking to do that. There are not a lot of guys in the league that you can ask that of, to like switch so much in that small span. You would probably rather have, like, let's say if it's maybe with Luka, you don't necessarily want him going out and getting all those rebounds. You really just want to focus on scoring and assisting on almost every night, right? Jalen Brunson's that kind of way, right? You don't really want him to be on the boards so much. You'd rather him be that first outlet pass. So let everyone else, let the bigs go get the boards, and we'll play on from there. Cade can do everything, and he's willing to do everything because he's a winning player. So let's bring that narrative back. That's what I've learned out of this first two games.
Right, and I think it's such a good point when you go into the discussion of like who's the best player in this series, where like I think it's Cade. I think a lot of Pistons fans think it's Cade, but Knicks fans and probably a good amount of just like NBA fans would probably argue it's Jalen Brunson.
They're learning
but
they're
for
wrong.
Me, and for me, it comes down to, like, again, we'll get into the foul stuff. Like, people don't like how Jalen Brunson plays basketball, which I don't either. I totally understand that. But for me, it's simply because Cade is like a two-way player. And I don't think you want him as your main like on-ball defender by any means. You want to give him some help, which you do have that help. But like you mentioned, he's able to contribute to many more aspects of the game than just scoring and making plays and initiating offense. And I think that's sort of the MO for a lot of the stars in this league, like the Lukas, the Brunsons, the Trae Youngs, and everything like that. And I think when you have a player like Cade, who he just has such a great feel for the game and like knows where he's supposed to be and everything, like that just gives you a leg up, and there aren't many players in the entire league like that.
Sorry, left it on mute there. All right, we got a great question here from Harry that I want to get to in a second. But before we get to that, I want to ask you, and listeners, you guys can play along, one question trivia. Who's the team's leader right now for defensive rebounds through two games?
I'm gonna go with Tobias Harris
and Cade Cunningham. It's both of them. They have
tied.
More defensive rebounds. Each of them, they are tied, and each of them have more defensive rebounds than noted very good rebounder Jalen Duren. Right? Like they have stepped up in a way that I don't think I could have really expected here. I was so nervous going into game two without Isaiah Stewart. I'm still truthfully a little bit nervous going into game three, knowing that he's still questionable, still day to day. But if you're going to get this type of effort from Cade and Tobias Harris, both of them playing about 40 minutes, Jalen Duren himself, he recovered well in game two. He adjusted well in game two, right? He had 13 and 12. He was efficient from the floor. He actually had a few blocks that I thought were very impressive. I think playing him on Josh Hart has the pro of letting him roam a little bit more to seek out those weak side blocks, which are good. It also takes him away from the rim a little bit, which is less good, hurts his rebounding a little bit. So there is a little bit of a trade-off there, but I thought he adjusted well there in game 2. But without Isaiah Stewart, right, to have Cade and Tobias step up like that, to seal a win in that second game, to come back to Detroit and have an opportunity to lock in home court advantage, I didn't expect it, and I was just so ecstatic to see it. That was I think these past 2 games have been the first time in quite some time that I have just sat back and watched the Pistons play as like just a fan, right? I wasn't taking notes as much. I left that for second watches or YouTube clips and things like that. I just wanted to sit down and watch. And so to have that in game 2 when they pull out the win, so many guys stepping up, Cade looking like a superstar, magical moment. I thought it was really, really cool to watch.
Yeah, and I think we can talk about Cade all day.
Yeah,
like he's been awesome, other than that rough fourth quarter in game 1. But like Tobias Harris has been so huge.
Yeah. Yes,
and something that we've talked about at length is just who's gonna be the number 2, the number 3 guy for the Pistons in the postseason, and Tobias has been that guy so far, especially scoring wise in game 1. But game 2, he made some big shots and got a bunch of rebounds as well. And I think that was Tobias was more of a what's he gonna be in the playoffs, just because of all the discourse on what happened with Philly and everything like that. But he's just been huge for this team so far, especially when you're missing a player like Isaiah Stewart as well. And like he played 43 minutes. He's like leading the team in minutes played. So just to have a guy like that right now that is able to score, defend a little bit, get some rebounds, like it pays dividends, and we saw that result in a win in game 2.
Yeah, he's really stepped up. In that game 2, it was 15 points, 13 rebounds on 6 of 11 from the floor. Like you said, he only had 1 turnover as well. So for a player that the Pistons would go to kind of late in clock when they just needed something, if Cade was really getting doubled and there weren't many other options, right? They just needed someone to step up, and he's been able to do that so far. But to be put in those situations and only have 1 turnover in that second game, that is huge, right? That is huge. He had a timely corner 3, I think in the second half. It was probably in the third quarter, late in the clock again. The one thing I do want to talk about as we kind of continue into this, shortly after we talk about a little bit of Ron Holland, is that in that second game, the Knicks were working really hard for their shots, for their baskets. And the Pistons really weren't, even when the Knicks were making it tight there in the fourth quarter. Right, the Knicks were working it down near the end of the shot clock. They were probing. They were trying to find all the nooks and crannies where they could find some sort of advantage, and then they'd get their shot up, they'd make it, but 5-10 seconds left on the clock. Pistons would go down on the other end and pretty easily get an open look. They weren't making them during that stretch when it was kind of getting tight, but it wasn't that the Knicks were making the Pistons miss. They were still just getting good looks, but they were just missing it. And I think that is a huge, huge trend to follow as we get into game 3. But before we dive into that more, how about this from our guy Harry Murrows? How are you guys feeling about the Ron Holland minutes so far?
I mean, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Wes, and you too, Harry, because honestly, I think we just haven't seen a ton from Ron Holland, and that's not his fault. He's played 11 minutes total so far in this series, and other than a couple offensive rebounds, just not really much there. I mean, I think it is just a byproduct of going into the postseason and shortening the rotation, but also just trying to keep your starters in the game for as long as possible has just decreased what he's doing a little bit. I mean, I think he is a great option considering he hasn't done much at all this series. Like, what if he scores a few buckets in game 3, game 4, game 5, whatever it is? Like, it could be, and I thought this before the series too, he could be one of those guys that the Knicks just don't pay much attention to when they're on defense, and that creates some open looks for Ron. I mean, we haven't really seen it yet just because of the limited minutes, but I think over time, like, he might hit them when they're least expecting it. He might not get much action just based on what we've seen so far. But especially if Isaiah Stewart misses game 3 or there are other guys in foul trouble, like, he's someone that you can go to, and no matter how many minutes he gets, like, I'm thrilled that he's getting this opportunity in his rookie year.
Yeah, I am too. I mean, like you said, it's tough to get too many big overarching conclusions based on 11 minutes of basketball split into 2 separate games, right? But I do think it's at least notable that he hasn't looked like a fish out of water out there, right? Like when he's been out there, like you said, a couple of nice hustle rebounds on the offensive side. He's generally been all right with his defensive rotations, and he just hasn't looked out of place, which 19-year-old rookie, like, that was definitely on the table. So I'm with you. I think as he continues to get a little bit more comfortable, maybe we start to see the minutes tick up a little bit. Maybe we start to see him, not like have a huge role, right? But get a couple of buckets, and you could kind of look at that as gravy if you're JB Bickerstaff. But overall, this is just great experience for him. Like you said, right? How many rookies that are picked top 5 get a chance to witness playoff basketball like this, and now witness competitive playoff basketball, right? It's not like the Pistons were, the Memphis Grizzlies here just getting waxed by the Oklahoma City Thunder. These are close games, right? These are really close games. So that's valuable minutes for Ron Holland when he does get in there. So I think right now it's pretty much just been learning experiences, and we'll see if it can elevate above that or not. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I mean, if you just want to, like, zoom out, bigger picture, like, career-wise, the Knicks aren't playing any rookies right now, and I mean, they didn't have any top 5 picks or anything like that. But just the sheer fact that, like, Ron Holland is in the playoff rotation, I think this is how we both expected it to go. Like, it's awesome, awesome for him, and, like, awesome for the team in general. Just as we see his game grow, like, he can say that he's been there before. He has a role, even if it's not a big role, on a good basketball team, on a playoff basketball team. And yeah, they're, like, especially in this draft year, like, there hasn't been a ton of that. Like, Reese Shea got some play in the play-in games, and the Grizzlies in Memphis, like you said, are in a series that they can't wait to be over. So for Ron Holland, I just think it's a great opportunity, but also just great for the Pistons in general, because he's a huge part of this team's future.
Absolutely. So let's do this here before we get into another question. Wanted to talk about the Pistons and the Knicks individually with this one, but let's start with the Knicks. What has surprised you most through these 2 games about just the New York Knicks, what you've seen from them?
Man, I will say, I think it's just how they've taken more threes than I was expecting them to. Sometimes those shots dropped, sometimes they didn't, but even when they are getting those looks, I think the Pistons are making them fight for them. And, like, Michael Bridges got a great look to tie the game in game 2, and he didn't hit it. I saw after the game, he said it felt good out of his hands, and it just didn't drop. But I think I was expecting a bit more, like, less of a perimeter game from them, and, like, we're not seeing the Pistons them kill the Pistons on the perimeter, and like campaign went off a bit in game one. So what are you going to do in those times? But I think overall I was expecting them to take less threes than they are, which might not be a great sign for the Pistons, but with some of the shooters that they have and how they've been going, like unless someone catches fire for three, I think that might be what the Pistons are like want.
Yeah, I mean, it might be, right? In game two, so in game two, the Knicks actually shot and made more threes than the Pistons did. All right. And kind of coming into the series, that was supposed to be the weakness for the Knicks, right? They were supposed to be a really efficient offense that just didn't take a lot of threes. So because they didn't take a lot of threes, if you were a team that does take a lot of threes and does make a lot of threes, then you can stick around a little bit longer than you reasonably should have against a team this talented. But that's not how it played out there in game two. Not at all, right? And the Pistons, it's actually reversed because the Pistons shot better from three in game one when they lost. Now, they obviously controlled that game for the second and third quarter. First quarter was tied. They probably... You can make a good argument they should have won that game if it all doesn't kind of collapse in on themselves with that being their first playoff game and that inexperience coming back to bite them. But regardless of that, right, if you're just looking at the three-point side of things, this is not how you would have expected the series to go so far, right? In each game, the team that shot worse from three won. And I think that actually transitions pretty well into what surprised me the most about the Knicks, and I guess by proxy the Pistons a little bit as well, but I didn't expect the Knicks to get dragged down into the mud like this. I mean, in game two, they scored 94 points. And they shot reasonably well from three. It just looked so difficult for them. And I don't know how else to describe it other than that. But you've got a team with Jalen Brunson, who actually has scored the most points in the NBA playoffs so far for teams that have played two games, right? He's going off. He's having two very good games. You got Karl Anthony Towns, who's that stretch big that has given the Pistons a lot of trouble in the past, but he's not shooting as much. And he's trying to go in the post a little bit more often. You're getting Josh Hart playing 40 minutes. It's just, there's some weirdness there that I don't understand exactly. And I'm not sure if the Pistons are forcing it out of the Knicks or if the Knicks are just, I don't know, stuck in neutral or something, but their offense hasn't made a lot of sense to me so far in these two games. I don't get how the Pistons have been able to just bump them and have that be enough to have, a 94-point output in game two. Yeah,
especially when you just pair it with the fact, like what we talked about previewing this series, how they're not, I wouldn't say they're even a good defensive team. Like I don't know if I would even give them that credit. So I think all like the problems and how the Pistons potentially match up well with the Knicks that we talked about when previewing this have really like they've appeared, but they've also sort of been heightened a bit. Mm-hmm. Like it's almost just like this Knicks team really doesn't make a ton of sense. And like it's interesting because I think the roster does on paper. So like I don't know if it's Tom Thibodeau, how he's using it, like if he's just not the right coach for this team. I don't know, but it seems like all of their flaws are just like showing themselves and then some in this playoff set. And it might just be because of who the Pistons are, and the Pistons know that, and they're gonna try to exploit that. But yeah, if the Pistons do pull out this series, like I think it's gonna be a really turbulent time in New York.
As it should be. I mean, maybe the way to put this is that for some reason, I don't know what it is, but for some reason that the Pistons play, up to the line, so to speak, with officiating, right? The Pistons all season, and this is part of why we love watching them, but they toe the line of what's allowed and what's not when it comes to bumping guys off ball, setting screens, all that stuff. They just play a physical brand of basketball. And for whatever reason, it seems like that specific trait of this Pistons team just pushes the New York Knicks into their worst instincts, right? Like Karl Anthony Towns not shooting enough. The Knicks going so often to a Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart pick and roll in the fourth quarter instead of using Karl Anthony Towns in that way, right? Basically asking Mikal Bridges to just be a 3-point shooter when we all know he's obviously a lot more than that, but you want him to space so that Jalen Brunson has more room to get into the paint. And then now because the Pistons are playing so physically, Jalen Brunson thinks he can hunt for more fouls than he usually does, right? I mean, this has been exaggerated so far compared to what he's done in the regular season. He's always been a little bit more of a, trying to draw fouls type of player, but it's not been this bad. This is new, right? This is new. So it's almost like every bad instinct that the Knicks team has that you would want if you were a Knicks fan them to turn away from. For some reason, the Pistons push and shove a little bit, and the Knicks fall right to it. And it's a good sign for Detroit. I think it's a terrible sign for the Knicks.
Yeah, I think Coffee Dark puts it good here.
I can see it. Yeah,
comments. The Knicks have better players, and the Pistons have the better team. Like, I think just how this Pistons team meshes off each other is pretty incredible, which is special when you just think the core is the same from last year, but you bring in these veterans who are all playing their role and playing it very well, and then it seems like this locker room is just incredible, like one of the best in the league. Like, I think you could take this statement that the Pistons have the better team if you're like putting talent aside, and I think it would go up against a lot of teams in this league. It's not perfect by any means, but overall, I just think when you are all in sync, especially in this like these playoff games, it just goes a long way. And talent probably wins out a lot of the time just because of scoring and whatever you're able to do. But I don't think that there's any debate that this Pistons team is just incredibly like put together, and they're all like buy in, all the stuff that you can't quantify, like they have it and then some.
So let's flip this on its head. All right, we just talked about what's been most surprising from the Knicks side of things. What about Detroit? What about the Pistons? What has surprised you most about the Detroit Pistons through these two games?
So I hope this isn't too general, but like if before we went into the series, if you would have told me that the Pistons would have won a basketball game when they shoot 22% from three, Tobias Harris goes 1 for 4, Cade Cunningham goes 1 for 4, Tim Hardaway Jr. 0 for 6, Malik Beasley 1 for 8. They won that basketball game, and they did it without Isaiah Stewart. Like, I would have said that you're crazy. You can even if you're just looking at the box scores without the score of the game, and you had to pick which game the Pistons won, you would have picked game 1. But that just speaks into like what we were talking about in this team. Like, you have Dennis Schroeder, who goes 3 for 5, makes a tremendously huge shot at the end. Like, that is why you make that acquisition at the deadline for plays like that, to have a guy that you can go to that can make that shot, has the confidence to take it and drain it. So that game 2 win, man, like I was just surprised at how it played out, and I think the Pistons did a great job in just making things incredibly difficult for the Knicks, like you said. But then you pair that with they did not have a good night by any means shooting the 3. The Knicks beat them in that perspective. Like, I would assume that you'd need Malik Beasley to make at least like 3 threes, no matter how many he takes in every playoff game, to even come close to sniffing a win. So just the fact that they were able to pull that one out, considering the night that they had shooting, especially from 3, it still surprises me.
The Pistons' leading scorer that game was obviously Cade Cunningham. Their second leading scorer, Dennis Schroeder. You could file that as well, right? On the list of, if you tell me before the game starts that X, Y, and Z happens, and I'd be like, there's no way they win. If you say, yeah, Cade's gonna go off, but the second leading scorer is Dennis Schroeder, I'm going, oh man, oh well. Let's
Tim
go back.
Hardaway Jr. had zero points.
Zero. He had zero. Asar Thompson fouls out in only 21 minutes of basketball. Like, how did they win that game? How did they win that game, Blake? I do not get it, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's because Cade is incredible, and then you have a guy like Dennis Schroeder who is able to make shots at the right time, and Tobias Harris was also huge. And then on the defensive end, like, you made things incredibly difficult for the Knicks. They only scored 94 points, and they did everything they could to get each of those 94 points, which is a formula for a win. Like, it wasn't pretty by any means, but good teams and teams that make runs in the playoffs, like, they're able to find ways to win games like that. And honestly, I didn't think the Pistons were to that point yet, just because they haven't been there. But they just showed us that they're able to do it. So I think any game, no matter who they're playing, no matter how the game is being mucked up or who's on and who's not, like, there's a path for them to pull out a win.
And I want to give JB Bickerstaff a lot of credit for pretty much everything that we've just talked about here, because look, throughout the regular season, we've talked about it a lot. Part of what has made this run for this young Pistons team so fun is that they could win in a variety of ways, right? They had games where they were playing barn burners and they pulled it out. They had games where it was very slow, right? Grinded out sort of defensive game. They've won those. They've had everything in between on that spectrum. They have won games in a variety of ways this season. That's been really fun to watch. And so you get into the playoffs and you know that it's going to be more physical. You know that it's probably going to be a little bit slower. And it's just a different level of intensity than the regular season games. We all know that, right? We know that that's true. You've got a young team going on the road to an extremely hostile arena at, it's the Mecca, one of the largest stages, right, that you could be playing basketball on. There's pressure. There's all this stuff that should be going against them. And I understand that they had that fourth quarter collapse there in game one, and that was a lot of the youth and inexperience coming through. Absolutely. But remember how that game started. The Knicks came out, they punched the Pistons in the mouth, right? They had Cade Cunningham in hard traps and just in a steel cage with OG Anunoby through the entire first half. There was very little going right. And how did they come out in that second half? Right? They go on a big run and they get a solid lead going into the fourth quarter after the third. How did they respond after the very first run there that the Knicks did in the first quarter? They buckled down after a timeout, right? They slowed down the pace and they started to get some easy stuff and they got right back into the game. They've been able to leverage that fact that they've won games in different ways and they're flexible in the talent that they have and the advantages they can create. And they've been able to use that to stick around when stuff isn't going exactly well. And not only that, right? So not only are they adjusting well in game, which I think is 100% credit to the coach and his staff, they seemed prepared, right? Really prepared for game one. They came out and, again, like I said, the Knicks did punch them in the mouth, but it didn't look like the lights were too bright right at the start of that game. It just looked like they were a little bit surprised by the intensity. Game two, from the tip, they were in control of that game. They controlled that game outside of like a 4-minute period late in the fourth quarter in game two. All of this is a coach and his staff and probably a bit of Cade Cunningham and those veterans on this team getting everybody ready on the same page for what they're about to go into, having a lot of them never done it before in their careers. And that is an incredible testament to the leadership in that locker room. You said this is one of the best locker rooms in the league. It's got to be one of the best leadership groups in the league as well to get this kind of outcome from this young of a team.
Right. And I think it's so easy in the playoffs for the wheels to kind of fall off. Like
Mm-hmm.
once something is going wrong, it just snowballs. Like we saw that with the Memphis Grizzlies when they got killed by the Thunder in game 1. And it's a different competition level, so it's not the best example, but you have like guys like Zach Edey playing in their first playoff game, who I saw a clip where Jaren Jackson Jr. was like trying to talk him through it on the bench and everything. And I just think when those, because you're gonna get punched in the mouth at certain times, especially when you're the number 6 seed playing against a team that has much greater expectations than you do, has a greater talent level and anything like that. But it's all about how you respond. And I think even like the 21-0 run was really bad, and I think that was a series of unfortunate events. But just being able to regroup after that game, because how they lost it was had to be defeating. If you're in that locker room, like you should have pulled that one out. You should have had your first playoff win for the franchise in 17 years, and a lot of these guys' first playoff wins in their careers. But just to regroup and put the past in the past and go back, and in certain times, like being able to weather that comeback that the Knicks were making in game 2 and find a way to pull that one out, that is huge. Like that's something that's gonna pay dividends moving forward, especially for these young guys that just really that haven't been there at all yet.
And whether the comeback on a night that nobody other than Cade and Dennis Schroeder are shooting well, too.
Right.
Right? Like that's a cold night, like you said, from Beasley, from Hardaway Jr., from almost all of your shooters. You have 2 guys that had nice games from the floor, 3 too, because of Tobias Harris. So that was it. And Cade was gassed by the end of that game. Right. So it fell on the shoulders of Dennis Schroeder, and he can close it out. But I don't know. It's just been so impressive to watch the resiliency, the ability to respond out of a team that has never been asked to do that before.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not at this level. Obviously, a lot of them have played very good levels of college basketball. I'm sure, I think a lot of these guys have been in like the NCAA tournament. There's a lot of pressure that comes there as well. But this is the NBA playoffs. It's a little bit different. And to see them rise to the occasion, bunch of 23, 22, 24-year-olds with a few veterans sprinkled in, so impressive. So incredible to watch.
Right. And I think we all thought if this team was going to qualify for the postseason this year, they would have to go through the play-in,
Mm-hmm.
which they exceeded that. Like, you didn't have even a single play-in game under your belt where you sort of just felt the level of basketball that you were going to play, and you've competed in both your games so far. And like the only other comparison you can make is in the when they had that like NBA Cup
Right.
game against the Bucks earlier
Which was
this
before
season,
they ever really started clicking, too.
yeah, and that feels like a century ago, and like you didn't have Dennis Schroeder at that point. So yeah, just the way that like the preparation and everything. Like I think I'm not surprised that that's how they came out, but it's certainly impressive, and I think it's a tip of the cap to JB Bickerstaff and the leaders amongst like the players as well.
Let's close on looking forward here. We do have a question from Coffee. I want to give it a shout out, but I don't really want to talk too much about the Jalen Brunson foul stuff because it is what it is, and you just got to deal with it. He says, is Jalen Brunson auditioning for a stuntman role in a Jackie Chan movie, which is a great pun. So I wanted to give the shout out, but if you have thoughts, by all means.
On this, I mean, we don't have to harp on it because I think we all know how Jalen Brunson plays, and it's not exciting for anyone to watch basketball. But for Tom Thibodeau to say after the game that like if Cade Cunningham is getting to the line at like absorbing contact on line drives, then Jalen Brunson too, when like Cade ended with 12 free throw attempts that game, Brunson ended with 11. I know the first half discrepancy was like greatly in the Pistons' favor, but like when you zoom out, as a team, it was fairly even, a little bit advantage Pistons, but then when you compare those two play, I just thought that was kind of ridiculous. But other than that, like I do think it's awesome. Like a part of being a part of the playoffs is like just your team has 2 to 3 hours, however long the game lasts, where you're like have the attention of every basketball fan. And when it's a game like in Madison Square Garden, you have Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns against Cade Cunningham, and the Brunson foul baiting stuff is like the top of the discourse for like everyone across the basketball community, like on social media. I just think it's pretty cool. Like one, just being that like center of the talking point in the basketball world, and then also just people giving Cade Cunningham credit for being like an ethical hooper, as the kids say, is pretty cool too.
The only thing I'll say to this is I'll give you more ammo to exactly what you were just talking about. Jalen Brunson has shot the second most free throws in the playoffs so far for any team, not just for either team in this series. And as well, he has drawn the most, not the second most, not the third, the most personal fouls against defenders who are guarding him in total between two games. So, to your point, he's certainly getting a good whistle here in these games. But let's...
Yeah,
coffee, yeah.
Coffee Dark says it here. Are you the same Coffee as in the DBB comments? Let us know.
Let us know.
But he mentioned he agrees with Tibbs, and Jalen Brunson should have got more foul calls. He should have fouled out of both games. Like, is that not when he's like throwing his body into a defender who's defending a shot correctly? Like, isn't that an offensive foul these days?
No, it's just my understanding is it's supposed to be on the floor. Yeah, so the leg kick, that one's an offensive foul. The one where you get the guy in the air and you dive forward into him, my understanding is because it's not a shooting motion, that should be an on-the-floor call. In both cases, when he did it to Asar and to Tobias, I believe the Pistons were in the bonus anyway. However, the second one I was not a fan of because it resulted in 3 free throws instead of 2, which seemed ridiculous. I mean, he just chucked it. That was a moonshot. Didn't even get anywhere near the rim. But it's still a foul. It still would have resulted in free throws, just not 3. But all right, let's end on this. Let's end on this one because hopefully it's more interesting to Pistons fans. I don't know if our listeners would rather listen to foul talk. Let us know in some comments and reviews afterwards. But what do the Pistons need to do to seal home court advantage here? Right? They've stolen it. They've stolen home court advantage. The series is even coming back to Detroit. They can lock that in if they win both of these games. What do they need to do?
I think the number one thing that sticks out to me is just defending at the level that we saw them defend in game 2. I think that's a tall task. Like, I think you're going to see some different things from the Knicks and just how they use Cat mainly. Like, I think they're going to find ways to get him going. So I think if Detroit's able to limit Cat, take him out of the game, like, I think that is just a disaster for the Knicks. And hopefully, I mean, they do have other guys that can make some shots. Jalen Brunson's going to get his, and Michael Bridges has been up and down, mainly down all year, but you never know. He's capable of making shots too. So they do have other players that can beat the Pistons, certainly, but I think just making things as difficult as possible is the main thing. But secondly, the Pistons should have won game 2 by like 20 points. And that's just a matter of not making threes. And I don't want to jinx anything, but I don't think you're going to see another like 1 for 8 game from 3 from Malik Beasley in this series. So if he's able to do what he normally does, like Tim Hardaway Jr. is able to make some shots, Tobias Harris still just continues what he's doing, like that will go a long way. Because even though the Pistons pulled out that win in game 2, they had to fight for it. They could never really pull away when the Knicks were sort of down and out a bit, which I think the Pistons could win these games by more than they are. Like, gotta find a way to get the wins, but if you're knocking down your shots at a better rate than they did in game two, like, it just turns into a math game, because we know even though the Knicks have shot more threes this series than we were expecting, the Pistons are a better 3-point shooting team than them, and I think they can kind of just play New York out of it if everything goes to plan.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, in short, it's just a keep doing what you've been doing sort of deal, right? I mean, if the Pistons can keep dragging the Knicks down into the mud, keep shooting, like you said, have a little bit more consistency there with the 3-point shooters, that would be helpful. If Malik is making more, Tim Hardaway Jr. is making more, and you expect that those guys pick it up, especially in these two games at home. So I think for me, the most important thing is keep the Knicks right around or under 110 points, because I am not scared by the Knicks defense. In either of these games, I don't think we've learned that we need to be fearful of the New York Knicks defense, even if they start leaning into the two big lineups. You and I have talked plenty about how that kind of makes life easier for the Pistons on the defensive end and is kind of a wash on the offensive side of the ball going against that Knicks defense. So, look, Tom Thibodeau is historically a very stubborn head coach. I would not anticipate much change over the rest of this series, be that, 3, 4, 5 games, however many more that we get, right? I would not anticipate all that much change. But the fact that it seems like online, a lot of Knicks fans are thinking, well, we should just try to do what the Timberwolves did and have Robinson play next to Cat, just like the Wolves had Gobert next to Cat. And, okay, go for it. If that's your solution, I am A-okay with it as a Pistons fan. So I think if you can keep them around that 110 points and you've got no worries about the Knicks really being able to stop you as a team that averaged around 112 to 115 this year offensively, sweet. I think that's the key. So I do want to rely on the offense. I worry about the barn burner. I think if you get into a barn burner with the Knicks, they can outrun you. But if you can keep them slow and keep this like an average scoring game, Pistons are going to have a great shot in both of these.
What do you think the series goes back to New York as? Like, do you think that is the most likely outcome, that the Pistons win 3 and 4, or what are you thinking?
Talk to me after game 3. Is that fair to say? Can I dodge it in that way? Look, I think if the Pistons win game 3, I would bet good money that they're going to win game 4 as well. I think if the Knicks can steal game 3 and this kind of pinballs back and forth a little bit, which I honestly don't know which is more likely at this point. It seems like, well, we said it before the series started, right? That the Knicks just kind of felt like a team where if you hit them the right way or if you give them a little bit of adversity, they might just kind of crumble. And game 3 is going to be the indicator, right? The Pistons should have won game 1. It took an uncharacteristic fourth quarter from this Knicks team to win game 1. The Pistons did win game 2, right? And the Knicks were in molasses the entire game, even though they were seeking out fouls and they fouled out Asar Thompson. And you did have Mitchell Robinson play close to 20 minutes, like all of that. Even so, they still lost game 2. If they go into game 3 and they don't have an answer, I think that might just be it. So could be seeing the series here, I guess. But I'm not gonna bet either way yet.
Yeah, for sure. It's just hard when like the Pistons have the momentum right now and everything is like they're going back to home court, but momentum can shift on it.
And it's not just that they've got the momentum now, though, right? Like even after that fourth quarter, it kind of felt like going into game 2. We were all as fans, we were worried about Isaiah Stewart, and justifiably, right? It ended up not mattering, but justifiably so. He's a great defender, great key role player for the Pistons. But leaving that aside, I think if there was no Isaiah Stewart injury, as fans, we came out of that game, we'd be feeling pretty good going into game 2, right? So it's not just like, oh, well, they won the second game, so now they got a little bit of momentum. Like it's more like, they controlled 3 out of 4 quarters. And then now they've controlled 4 out of 4 quarters.
Yeah.
Feeling
Game
good.
1 was almost like, it was like a proof of concept. Like we didn't know going into this this series, like how this team would do in the playoffs. Like we thought they were capable of at least making it competitive, but then it was immediately like, no, they can win these games. And tough loss
on the road,
certainly, but
with bad scoring outputs, with injuries, and now you're coming home.
Yeah. I don't know. It's looking good, at least for Detroit. Don't want to jinx anything because it's a long series. But and the atmosphere in LCA,
I'm excited to see
it's
it.
Going to be incredible for all the games. Yeah, looking forward to it. But hopefully we get Isaiah Stewart back. But shout out to Paul Reed too. He had some the Paul Reed experience is crazy, but he also made a few layups that were big too. So shout out to him.
It was pretty fun when he was out there with Tobias Harris because Paul Reed moves a bit better in space. So he was oddly a better Josh Hart matchup than Jalen Turin was. So it was a really weird situation where they went to the bench, and in game 1 and through most of the season, when you go to the bench, that would be Isaiah Stewart sticking up and guarding Karl Anthony Towns. But instead, they just left Tobias Harris on him, and here comes Paul Reed is just sprinting everywhere with his hair on fire with that trademark hustle he has. And then he's able to stay in front of Josh Hart a little bit better. It was a really weird dynamic, and it was fun to watch.
Yeah, for real. And while we're talking about the end of the roster, Wes
Bobby
put this
Klintman
up on the screen, but Coffee did let us know it is the same Coffee as the DBB comments. So shout out to you. Thanks for joining. Thanks for always leaving questions. But ask about Bobby Klintman, how he's developing. I feel like not much
is he on the bench
he played
in these games.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
I believe so.
Yeah.
At least. Yeah. So I don't think much after the regular season games that didn't matter where he looked good. I think with the G League and everything, the season he had, I think he can, still has a lot of work to do and you don't know what the role looks like, but maybe he can be what Simone Fontecchio is for this team in a few years. I think that's what you're looking for from him. And maybe it's better than that. Maybe it's not. And then it's just a 2nd round pick, which is okay.
And he got better, right, as the G League season went on. He did improve. If you looked around, I think it would have been January, his averages were pretty rough, right? But he was coming off the injuries and still kind of getting acclimated. So he did improve as the season went on. Like you said, he had some solid minutes there in the garbage time game at the end of the year. I don't know. It's always tough with these 2nd round guys. He's definitely got a lot of tools, like the jump shot, like the passing chops that he seems to have. And I think it's great that he's getting to sit on the bench if he is. I think I saw him. I don't remember for sure. Do you think you saw him? I don't remember for sure. But
so too.
If he is out there, that's awesome. Just to get him in that environment in the playoffs, similar with Ron Holland, even though he's not getting the same minutes that Holland is. He's still there. He's still witnessing what that playoff atmosphere and intensity looks like. I think that's a good thing. So, who knows? Fingers crossed that, like you said, it goes well. Fontecchio is probably a good-ish comparison. I think Tech can do a little bit more off the dribble than you'd ever really want Klintman doing. Maybe, I don't know, someone a while ago brought up a young Tobias Harris, and I think that kind of stuck with me as maybe the mold you want him to fill. But regardless, it's hard to tell, but certainly good that he's out there and witnessing this awesome Pistons team in the playoffs right now.
100%. And we made it through a whole podcast without shouting out Troy Weaver, who got hired by the Pelicans today. And joining,
hey, good for Troy.
Joe Dumars' front office. I actually kind of like it if Troy's mainly focused on prospect evaluation and Dumars does the contracts and the trades. I know Pistons fans know it. Dumars was up and down at times, but built a championship team. So,
well, look, if there's one thing Joe Dumars did really well, it's free agency contracts.
Oh man. Well, hey, we are. Yeah, that is great. Shout out to Pelicans fans. it can only go up from here. We'll see what they do, and they have an interesting season. But I will close it out from here. Everyone who's going to the game 3, game 4, whatever it is, have a great time. The atmosphere is going to be incredible. Call our number to ask a question. Let us know how your experience was. Vent about whatever. We'll listen to it. Gives us stuff to talk about on the podcast. So the number for that is 313-355-2717. And special thanks to our guy Sean Corp, the managing editor of Detroit Bad Boys, for supporting the show. And shout out to you guys for the great questions, comments, and all the talking points tonight. We'll catch you next week, whether on your commute or live with us on YouTube. We can't wait to talk more Detroit basketball.